Today is July 13th, 2015, and we are interviewing Rick Couto for the Rhode Island Music Hall of Fame. Thank you, Rick, for doing this.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
We are at Rick's house here in Riverside, Rhode Island. Can we start by talking about your background, including where you were born, when you were born, your family, and your neighborhood?
Sure. I was born in 1951. Basically grew up in East Providence. My neighborhood was really my cousins. My family was very close. My aunt lived 3 houses down. My grandmother lived a block away. And we were always surrounded by family. Parents were pretty active with, to bringing the whole group together for dinners and picnics and stuff like that. Musically, the way that relates to me a little bit is my dad was the drummer, and he was missing from a lot of those events a lot of the times, or getting away early or coming in late as a result of playing a gig or having to go to a gig.
Was your father a professional musician?
Yeah,
Did he do that for a living?
My father was a professional musician, and he worked 2 jobs. He worked at the Narragansett Brewing Company. He was there for 30 years. Previous to that, he was on the road with a band and whatnot in New York City. He played with a band called the Tommy Reynolds Orchestra. But my dad was, fairly well-known Rhode Island drummer. Played with a great little group. Had great gigs and was really busy all the time. Played a lot of weddings. Played nightclubs. Played a lot of shows. I actually inherited a volume of 8x10 glossies that he collected over the years, most of which are signed to him. Includes people like Tony Bennett and Fats Waller, and pretty amazing collection of pictures actually. A lot of unknowns too, but just amazing representation of the entertainment industry at that time.
Did he play with those people as well?
He was forming in a backup band. Those people would tour, and the local musicians would get the book and play the show.
And what did your mom do for a living, Rick?
Lots of different things. My mom was not educated in one particular area, so she worked at the local cleaning company. She did all kinds of stuff. She was, she was the rock in the family for sure. She was the Boy Scout den mother, and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And did you have brothers and sisters too?
Yeah, 2 brothers.
Mm-hmm. And your neighborhood was a pretty quiet one in East Providence.
Yep.
Which schools did you go to over there?
Let's see. My grade school was Bliss in the East Providence community. And then from there we moved from the central part of East Providence to here in Riverside. I went to Riverside Junior High School, and finally went to East Providence High School, and then eventually to Rhode Island School of Design.
Okay, yeah. So was your father your first exposure to music?
Well, yeah, I guess that would definitely be the case. Unlike me, though, I play a lot of music in the house all the time. My dad, they didn't really play a lot of music. When they had a party, they'd bring out their collection of albums and play some music. My mom had the AM radio on in the kitchen all the time, so we got to hear, all the popular stuff of the day. We're talking late 50s, early 60s, I had older brothers and older cousins who really liked to play and dance, and they had little dance parties. My uncle actually was fantastic. This is classic actually. He used to have every Saturday, he would roll up the rug in his living room, and he would let the kids have a dance party. He would, my cousins had stacks of 45 records, literally piled up on the shelf next to the record player, and they had the poodle skirts and the penny loafers. I mean, it was right out of Happy Days. And we were little kids, me and my other cousins, we would kind of be off in the corner. We'd actually had this little place in the stairwell where we could sort of see through the living room, and we would be so envious, and we would watch them dance and have their party. They'd take a break. My aunt would come out with sandwiches and Cokes with straws in the bottles. I mean, it was literally like you could paint the 50s picture there. And one of the people at that event, most Saturdays, would eventually get up while they were eating their sandwiches and the music would stop for a little while. He'd walk over to their upright piano and play the popular tunes of the day, and a lot of them, they might sing them or whatever, and he might play and they would dance, whatever. Turns out years later, that guy was Mark Tabor. Was obviously someone we know, a local, fantastic piano player.
Mhm.
So yeah, family life was generally pretty good at a very young age, and the exposure to music, like I said, just knowing the fact that my father was a musician, that was something a little different, a little special. That created something I think I perceived it as being kind of cool.
Nice, nice. And did you listen to radio yourself at that time?
Oh yeah,
And
I mean, as a kid, again, they control the airways, but as we got older, we got our own radios, and we, would listen to things. Now, again, I was exposed to my older cousins, so some of the early stuff that I remember is like I remember seeing Jerry Lee Lewis playing Great Balls of Fire on television because I was being babysat by my older cousin. That would have been my older cousin Gene, and I think my brother was around or whatever. But the older kids were responsible to watch the younger kids while the parents went out, and they were definitely going to watch some rock and roll if it was on our little black and white TV. And I very distinctly remember seeing that whole thing with the piano and the foot up on the thing, and I was little, and I thought, wow, what is this? It was almost scary in a way because it had so much power. I remember having a little feeling of like, ooh, am I supposed to be watching this? Am I doing something bad?
Interesting.
Yeah. There was a whole thing about, he's playing the devil's music.
Okay, gotta go with that.
So, maybe that a little bit was in the air. But, I mean, it wasn't just him. I remember other songs and moments I remember from that generation that kind of floated to me are like Little Eva. She played a song called "The Locomotion." I remember Dee Dee Sharp. She used to play a song called "Mashed Potato." And Gary U.S. Barnes. I danced till 2:45. And I remember those songs from them, dancing to them and playing them. So I think that's, I think I got more exposure to music from my older siblings, cousins, than specifically my dad. But the fact that he was a musician, I saw that as something unique about him that was different from all the rest of the people in my life at that time, which again is mostly family and some neighbors.
And did that influence you to want to play the drums as well? And
I have to think it did.
And then, at what point did you start playing the drums?
Well, we moved to Riverside, and I went to junior high school here. And sometime in junior high school, you have to make the decision: are you going to be in the art path or the music path? That's the way it was in those days. You picked one or the other. So I naturally picked drums in the band. I played in the marching band and whatnot. I carried the bass drum in the marching band. I played at the games and the concerts at the school and whatnot. So that was my first exposure to actually playing. Somewhere in that time we started, my parents sent me to take formal lessons on drums with George Gear. He was the guy in town. There was the George Gear's drum shop was in the Conrad building downtown, which later housed the first Lupos.
Ooh.
So I have a lot of history in that one particular block in downtown Providence. And I take the bus from junior high school. I take the bus downtown, do my lesson. Either my brother or my mother would pick me up and take me home. And I did that for years. And I remember finally I got through the last book, Syncopation book with George Gear. And he said, okay, you're all set. You should go out and do some gigs.
Really?
Now at that point, I never did, 4 on the top and a 2 and a 4 on the on my left hand. I played rudiments all the time and patterns. I thought, I don't know how I can do a gig. But right around that time, it was like 1964. In fact, it was the fateful day of February 9th, 1964. The Beatles came on Ed Sullivan. And for the first time, I saw somebody doing. And I got it instantly. That show ended. I went right down to my practice pad because as kids, in those days, you didn't practice on a drum. You practiced on a rubber pad on a piece of wood.
Yeah.
Which actually my father made us. And I went right down, it was this like moment of discovery, like that's how that groove is placed in the song. It's not dun, 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 you know. It's this thing, this pattern, you know. And that was it. At that point, I kind of finally saw what the drummers were doing in these bands, you know. So again, at that point, it was the Beatles, Rolling Stones, the whole British invasion that just took over, and I just started listening. You know, we had our AM radios, and we would just wait for those songs that we loved to come on the radio. Finally got a little turntable, bought my first 45, which was "You Really Got Me" by the Kinks, and you know, maybe I guess the rest is history. You know?
Yeah.
But of course, we moved on to other influences beyond that. You know.
Let's see. So, did you get any involved with any bands at that point?
Well, you know, a little bit. We try to put some local guys together and see if we could do something, but not quite yet. Then, you know, we're still kind of young. Didn't really realize how to do that yet. So, still a lot of influence in just listening. You know, moving from like that British invasion into discovering like the San Francisco music. I was a big fan of the Jefferson Airplane, Grateful Dead. You know, I went to Woodstock.
You were?
I was able to, you know, see all this stuff firsthand. I was in a band before I went to Woodstock. One of my, I guess, the very first real band I was in around that time in the mid '60s was a band called the East End, with a dear friend Bob Conroy, God rest his soul, and the local guy still in town, Mike Roblinski. And you know, we played some covers. We played 96 Teardrops, and I remember that we did that song, and we did some Animals, you know, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, those kind of songs. And I got in another band called the Blues Oracle. That was a little more sophisticated. This band had a guitar player, had a little more history. He could play well. A singer, this fellow from East Providence, Tony Foley, who really, you know, knew how to front a band and look like he was in a band. That was a band that we finally like got gigs, played at, you know, school dances, and really kind of worked on the songs a little more, and developed into more of a real band.
And was that in high school at that point?
That was in junior high school still.
Junior high school
oh, yeah,
still.
Still
wow.
in junior high school. Yeah.
How about high school? Did you have any bands at that point?
So high school involved into finding my Riverside musical family. So that would be Dave Tannery, Jim Tate, Ken Reynolds. We started playing. Well, the first band didn't include Ken, actually. The first band was Powerhouse, was the name of the band. And that was with Maggie DeLuca. That was Maggie, Dave Tannery, Guido D'Arezzo on bass, me on drums, and Jim Tate on guitar. With that band, we did a lot of Jefferson Airplane, because we had the girl singer, and that was, you know, something we really liked. And we, you know, we had gigs. We played, yeah, again, church dances and stuff like that. We rehearsed right here down a couple blocks away at Dave Tannery's house in his basement. And that eventually is what, after a few twists and turns, I played with that configuration from high school into college. And I think completely through college, when I was playing music in a band, I was playing with those guys. It was still Powerhouse. And I may not have the history 100% correct, but I'm pretty sure it's something like that. And then musically evolved. I left college and decided to just get out of town for a little while, and went to Cape Cod, lived down there, had some friends down there. So Jim Tate, who was in that band, thought that was a good idea and came along, so we got a house together, and we put a band together down there called Jimmy Steak and his Chuck Wagon Review. And we played at the one and only place that was open all winter, a place called The Pub in Wellfleet, Mass. And kind of developed a nice little following. And it was when I remember, you know, after a few weeks playing the pub every weekend, every Friday and Saturday night, the clientele started complaining, like, you guys got to learn some new songs. And we kind of realized, oh yeah, we got the same audience, you know, we can't just keep throwing the same stuff at them. So we started to buckle down and really learn a lot of songs. And again, the influences in those days were, you know, the Grateful Dead and people like that, and started to realize, hey, these guys, you know, play hundreds of songs. They don't have a 20-song set list. They have a 200-song set list. And we thought that was intriguing. And we, you know, started to experiment with improvising and jamming and playing long solos and just starting. And we used to like do this thing and say like, well, let's just start. Pick a key and just start. And that would, you know, eventually that got to be called jam bands, but at that time that didn't exist. And we were kind of doing it out of a need because, you know, we needed fresh material because these people were getting bored with our songs. So the pub became a real testing ground to learn stuff and to figure, you know, learn how to perform and play for people. And we were part of a little community down there of, you know, hippies and runaways. You know. So after a few years on the Cape, it was kind of like time to get back to Providence and pursue a career in graphic design because that's what I went to school for, and play music with my pals that I was missing with, most of whom were still here. And at that point, Dave Tannery and Clem were at Providence College. So somewhere in there, around August, the last year I was there, so no, I think it was October, the last year I was on the Cape, we got invited to play at Providence College at a, just a pickup thing, a party. It was pretty famous now in Riz history, was this Halloween party at Providence College, because this was where the first time I encountered Mr. Clem. And the first time I saw Clem, he had a white lab coat on and a red clown nose on that was flashing on and off red. And we just got together and figured out some songs and played for this party, and it was, you know, pretty outrageous. And shortly after that, it was time to come back to Rhode Island and get together with these guys and make some serious music, and that was how Riz started.
Ah.
So that became Riz at that point.
It did, okay. And when are we talking about? Early 70s?
Now we're in 75, probably 75. We took a while to get it together. Actually, the very first version of Riz with these Providence College guys was Clem and Dave Tannery. They were at PC. They brought in a bass player whose name is Mike Marvell, and then it was me and and Jim Tate. It was just a 5-piece at that point. And college ended. Mike Marvell was from Canada. It was time for him to go home. Jim Tate and Ken Reynolds had a history of playing together here in Riverside. Of course, we knew Ken just from being a Riverside guy. He was the logical choice to replace Mike Marvell. And that's really the beginning of Riz, and the Riz that really started to work and get out and play in clubs. And you have to mention Beaver Brown at this point, because we friended Beaver Brown. They liked us, we liked them. They put the word out that we were a good band and club owners should hire us. They introduced us to Kenny O'Brien, who was a local manager. He started handling us and getting us gigs. And that got us to be more of a professional unit and really get out there playing music.
And what were some of the clubs?
Those days, let's see, we used to play Schiller's. No, I'm sorry. It was the Blue Door before it was Schiller's, down in Narragansett. We played Gulliver's in Smithfield. You know, I can't remember. There's a lot of those places, and they're all documented in our Riz archives. But a lot of the dates that Kenny O'Brien gave us were not right for the band. And although he was doing a great job, you know, working with Beaver Brown, we were low on the totem pole for him. So the band evolved a little bit more. Jerry Xavier, who was just another East Providence guy and a really good friend, played in a band earlier with Dave Tannery, was around the band and was a great singer. And he was a drummer originally, so we didn't need another drummer. But he used to just come. He wanted to be part of what we were doing. He'd move gear and stuff like that. And then finally one day he said, look, I've been training myself to play the piano. If you guys don't mind, at rehearsals, I wouldn't get in the way, but I would just play along with you guys, would help me learn to play. Well, after a couple of rehearsals, you know, it was done. Jerry had to be in the band. His piano started setting an amazing background for us, but more importantly, his harmony vocals were, you know, essential. And to this day, when Riz plays, you know, if you listen to the tapes after the show, you can hear Jerry Xavier's place in that band. So it's, you know, it's a perfect match for us. So the band grew to 6 pieces at that point. You know, I'm forgetting Bob Weisberger was in that very early Riz. And I'm sorry to,
that's all right.
to make that error.
That's all right.
So again, the first Riz was Clem, Dave Tannery, Jim Tate, Mike Marvell, replaced early by Kenny Reynolds, Bob Weisberger on sax and flute. And once we added Jerry Xavier, you know, we had a pretty good sized band. We really started to put the songs together. We were really starting to get an identity, and we really started to realize that there were some clubs that Kenny O'Brien was putting us in that, you know, really weren't for us. You know, some of them were working out. We played the Edge in January's in Pawtucket. Those were 2, you know, pretty active clubs. And, you know, we had hopes to play at Lupo's. And well, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. I'm not sure that, yeah, Lupo's probably wasn't even open yet.
A little bit later, yeah.
So around this time, a little management company started to develop in Providence called the Banzini Brothers. And they could relate, and we could relate to them a little better than our relationship with Kenny O'Brien. So they started trying to win us over, and they needed a couple of bands to start to manage and handle, and we had a little bit of an established thing. We weren't at the Beaver Brown level at that point, but the other game in town was this guy Ricky Carr, and he managed a certain style of band, and we weren't in that style. So the long story short, we ended up switching over to the Banzini Brothers, and that's when things really took off, because that company grew. They used to do a lot of shows. It would be like Little Feat and Elvis Costello. They did a Springsteen show. They did you know, a lot of big stuff in town. Bob Ware, when he did his solo tour, they handled him. Little George, Dickie Betts, we warmed up for him. So all of this stuff came through Banzini's. New Riders of the Purple Sage, we warmed up for them through the Banzini's. Then they really took us under their wing in terms of giving us the time to develop. They had a beautiful house that they worked out of on the east side that had a huge carriage house in the back, and that became our rehearsal facility. They bought us a big van so we could move our gear. They got us a road crew that could move the gear for us. Wow. They got us legal, put us on the books. We had vacation time that we could, you know, rehearse. We got weekly paychecks. I mean, it was all very legitimate at that point.
Now we're at the late 70s, early 80s? That's
late 70s now. And so this is when Lupo started. So Lupo opened up his first club, and he had his, what they would call today a soft opening. On a Thursday night, and Riz played that night, and the weekend was Room Full of Blues. And it wasn't long after that he said, I can't do this anymore in this space, it's too small. So Lupo expanded where he was. He started renting the place next door, and they knocked down the wall, and he became a much bigger club. And it wasn't long before we were the regular Monday night band at Lupo's, and then we eventually shifted over to Tuesday nights, and we did that Tuesday night or Monday night for well over 3 years.
Where else did you do the living room and the others?
No, we didn't do the living room. You kind of did Lupo's or the living room for the most part.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Oh.
They were across the street from one another.
Ah, so there was competition.
And Lupo's was a bigger space at that time. Gulliver's, the Blue Door became Schiller's. We played that venue. We played a lot of college dates. the Banzini brothers booked us, did a lot of like spring weekends, college dances, things like that. Yeah, that's kind of the heyday for Riz, was all during that time, 76, 78.
Any particular memories of a particular gig from that era?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, amazing evening we had. We played the Lowell Memorial Auditorium. We warmed up for the Kinks. And the Kinks booking agents were in the UK. And so they didn't really know the environment that well. The Kinks played in Lowell, Mass, and evidently they had the next 5 days off. So the booking agents left them in the hotel in Lowell, Mass. Not a place you really want to be hanging out for 5 days. So Jack Rich from the Banzini brothers realized this during that course of that evening, and he canceled their hotel in Lowell and got them hotels in Providence. Figured if they're going to hang out for 5 days, they might as well be hanging out with us in a better place. So next thing you know, I mean, again, I said earlier, the first 45 I bought was You Really Got Me. So here's one of my heroes, Mick Avery, the drummer, and I'm driving him in my car from Lowell, Mass to Providence to drop him off at the Marriott Hotel in Providence, and we spent a week together at the Banzini brothers' house that I described earlier, and pretty memorable week. I can at least say that on camera. These guys were a lot of fun. They had their own little, in bands you a lot of times have your own jokes and your own little in jokes and little humor. They exposed us to theirs, which was really cool. There was a grand piano in the living room. They spent a lot of time just playing old Irish songs and singing, and we had a lot of fun. And then finally our Tuesday night came along, and it's time we're playing. Oh, what are you guys doing? We're playing at this bar in town tonight. You're playing? Can we come? Of course. So we go to set up and whatnot at Lupo's on the Tuesday, our regular Tuesday thing, and this was when the stage was the back of the stage was against the glass at the some people will remember this, was the back of the stage was at the glass to the outside, to the street, to the Westminster Street, and unfortunately it was a little bit of a slow night that night, but cool. But we had an audience. We started to spread the word that the Kinks are going to come down and play and sit in. Now again, this was before Twitter and cell phones. There was a phone booth in Lupo's, and people started going to the phone and calling their friends, and next thing you know, the place starts getting full, and not long after that, the Kinks come in. And so we play a few songs, and finally I invite them up on stage, and all of them except for the Davey brothers. Ray was there, Dave was not there, but the whole rhythm section and whatnot all came up. I grabbed a tambourine because I'm not gonna say I didn't play with the Kinks, and I forget what we even played, but they played 3 or 4 songs. It was pretty amazing, for a young guy and a musician. And again, go back to that first single that I bought. That's one.
That's a great
fine
story.
Memory.
Yeah.
So earlier bands for me was the Lamoille Percussion Ensemble. John Lamoille was the leader of that band. And again, this is back in time. This was before there was the genre world music. John wanted to put together an all percussion group. He was a local percussionist, a real percussionist, congas and chimes and shakers, and he was a great kick drummer as well. But his forte was he played in this great jazz group, and they played a lot at a little bar called Allery's in Providence.
Heard of it, yeah.
And he wanted to do this percussion. He had this concept to do this percussion group. So he recruited me. He recruited Clem, who's not known for being a percussionist, but John saw that in him anyway. He recruited John Holcher, who was a bass player, but same thing. He saw that there was simpatico. He recruited Vinnie Pagano, very young Vinnie Pagano at the time, and Bro Dunn. So the 6 of us put together the Lamoille Percussion Ensemble. Now I had spent time in the Cape, and while I was on the Cape jamming and playing with the Jimmy Steak and the Chuck Wagon Review, I discovered the music of Airto, a Brazilian percussionist. And that opened my mind up to all these incredible sounding instruments that Airto in particular played. Things called the berimbau and a caxixi and all these different, percussion instruments, the cuica. And I meet John Lamoille, and he's got all this stuff, and he knows what to do with it. So the percussion ensemble gave me an opportunity to play those instruments and play a whole nother kind of music. I had a great moment with John at one point. I'm digressing a little bit, moving forward, but we had to have a meeting somewhere before this happened. We were in Riz. We were playing on Block Island, a place called Captain Nick's, I believe, or maybe they were at Captain Nick's. We were somewhere else, but anyway, we went to wherever we were playing to have rehearsal in the afternoon. There was a note on my snare drum. It said, "We're at," I think it was Captain Nick's. "After your gig, come on over. We play later than you guys," or something. So it was the Jerry Gentry trio, which was Jerry Gentry, John Holzer on bass, and John Lamoille on kit and percussion. He was the kind of jump back and forth. And had been listening to a lot of jazz since I was on the Cape, listening to this, Brazilian music, but not really playing this stuff, playing, rock and roll. So we finish our gig. We don't have to pack up because it's a multi-night gig. Thankfully, in those days, we had a lot of those. So we went right over to Captain Nick's to check out the Jerry Gentry trio. Well, they acknowledge us when we come in. They finish that first song. John says, "Come on up," to me. I'm like, I practically, I didn't know what I was going to do. I don't know how to play this stuff, "Get on the drums." I said, "Well, what are we going to do?" Classic song, St. Thomas. You'll recognize it. St. Thomas, I kind of know it. It's by Sonny Rollins. Right? Goes like that. These guys, okay, St. Thomas, ready? 1, 2, I'm on the drums. I'm just trying to keep up. It was an amazing experience, because they were so talented. They just carried me. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. They just carried me right through the tune. Everything's blank at this point. I'm just following these guys, and it's a blast. I don't know if we did that song only, if we did another couple of songs, I can't remember. But I remember walking out of there, I was walking on air.
Really?
Because it was my first time playing like jazz.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys were incredible, and we were just laughing. We had a great, great time. But I always remember that tempo was just so fast. They just, killed that thing. So fast forward a few years, I now know John. I go see him a few times. We talk music, we talk drums. Again, that feeling you have, that you're sympathetic with one another. So we put together the Lamoille Percussion Ensemble, and it was one of the most enjoyable bands I have ever been in. Again, another memory from that. I remember the first gig we played was at Allery's. We had literally hundreds of instruments to move. Everything from a little tiny thing that shakes to a giant concert bass drum, timbales, full drum set, 2 sets of congas. I mean, amazing. 2 tables, trees with chimes and bells and all kinds of stuff. And we started the show with this song called the Brazilian Trilogy. The concept was, the first part of the trilogy was the Brazilian jungle. Now, you walk in, you see this whole set, like all these instruments, and you go, what the heck is this, as a patron coming to see this show? What's that? Well, look at that thing. That's a weird looking thing. What's that? And we had this plan that we would just be milling, saying hello to our friends, etc. John would give us the little cue, and we would mill our way up to the instruments, and bing, and the other guy would join in, and we would just do this, create this jungle mood. And little by little, after people are saying like, what's that, all of a sudden they're seeing I'm playing that and he's playing that, And he's shaking that. And it's starting to come something. We get bird whistles. We're doing this whole jungle theme. It just sounds like you're in the jungle. And then finally Clem straps on this big drum. It's called a sirdu. And it goes boom, da, boom, 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 da, boom, da, boom, boom. And we start this samba rhythm. And we have an arrangement around it. John takes a solo on the congas. Feeling Couto takes a solo on the timbales. Comes to a point, there's a cue. Boom, 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 boom. Then Clem doubles it. Boom, 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 boom. Now we play the whole thing again. Part 3 of this trilogy, really fast, just kicking the whole thing until we get it to the end, and we move, shake, no time, it's just noise, boom, it ends. The place goes nuts, like a sucker shot. We took them from ground zero to 10,000 miles an hour, and the place goes crazy. It was a fantastic thing. And I remember that end of that day, we're all done, we're packing up all these things, we have little cases and boxes and bags and places to put things and loading up our cars, a couple of cars to get all this stuff out of there. And John comes up to me, hey, by the way, here, pays me. And I had this experience like, I get paid for this too? Like it was so real with me, like I forgot about the money. We've been working on this thing for months, you know, I forgot. Well, yeah, I get paid for this too? It was fantastic, really great. So good history with John.
Nice. Would you say
John, actually, that kind of blends into your next question about Joe Perillo.
Well, backing it up, we're just like a kind of an analysis moment. The learning experience, those kind of learning experiences, what do they do for you personally as a musician? Do they?
Well, broaden my base tremendously. And, you know, now I felt like at this point now I'm not like, not to say this in a negative way, but I'm not like just a rock drummer. I got something else going on. I'm not afraid to touch these congas. I'm not afraid to make some other sounds. You know, we always used a little percussion and riz anyway, and we would bring congas, and Clem would play, and Bob would play. You know, when they weren't playing their horn, they would add things. And you listen to old riz tapes, like some pretty cool stuff going on in that whole percussion side. But for me, it just really broadened my base. And I guess somewhere in there, Joe Perillo became aware of me. Because, of course, he knew about John, because he was more on that jazz side. And he has invited me to a few experiments with him. One of which was just a trio. I was going to play small percussion instruments with an upright bass player and Joe on piano. And that didn't ever really gel. We had a few rehearsals and a couple things came out of it. I don't know, I moved into some other things. Joe got a great little, his first version of the Joe Perillo Ensemble together with a really good percussionist. I can't remember his name, it escapes me. But we were all friendly. I remember going to one of Joe's gigs and bringing my berimbau with me and kind of hiding it. A berimbau is a big bowed instrument that's used in Brazil. It's actually part of like a discipline, like judo or karate, that kind of a discipline.
Interesting.
And it's a single string instrument with a gourd, and you hit it with a stick, and you use a coin to bend the string, and you get plays a sound similar to that. So I kind of hit it, and at a certain point in Joe's show, I pulled it out, and I walked from the back of the room playing the thing and joined the band. And I think Joe will remember that, you know. But that kind of solidified a relationship. And when this percussionist moved on, I was again the natural guy to join Joe's ensemble, and I spent 6 years doing that. We did 2 CDs. You know, that was an opportunity for me to play hand percussion with a drummer, and not to be responsible for the rhythm was a great thing, because I could enhance the rhythm when I wanted to, or when it was right for the material. But I had the opportunity to color the song and express myself in that way with chimes and shakers and little bells and stuff. And that was really a great thing for me. That got me into the jazz area and got me, you know, a broader base of drums and percussion.
And where did Perillo play? At that
let's
time?
see, where did we play with Joe? We had a regular gig at Cave, a little restaurant in Providence. We played there like whatever it was, the second Friday of every month. We did that for a very long time. And beyond that, you know, they were just scattered gigs. I believe we played at Allery's. Again, I'd have to go back and look it up. We played a lot of little mini concerts, summer outside things. You know, that band was a little bit sophisticated, so it could fit in certain genres where a rock band maybe wouldn't. Mm. I remember we were doing some things in Newport. So, yeah.
Very nice. And how long did that last with the Joe Perot?
That was about 6 years. Hmm. Yeah. I took a little time off after that. I had a son, and I didn't want to be out all the time. So I took a little time off after that. But in that downtime, there was the first Riz. There was a couple of Riz reunions that occurred. Not the first one. The first one was earlier. And you know, there were some other opportunities to play. And during that time, it was mostly like some warm-ups for other bands, and they'd say, you know, Riz is perfect for this. Why don't you guys get together and do this? So we do that.
Hmm. And now we're coming around to Mark Cutler, I guess.
Yeah, eventually we get to Mark Cutler. I knew Mark, of course, just from the music scene. I was a big fan of the Schemers. When I wasn't playing a lot, my then wife and I really enjoyed going out to hear Mark, and we would go hear whatever band he was in at the time. And it was the Dino Club several times, Schemers several times. And the guys knew me. I was good friends with Bob Giusti, their current drummer. They'd call me up to sit in on a tune or two. I was always really happy to do that. That eventually led to Mark calling me to do some gigs that Bob Giusti couldn't do. So, and that was always great, kind of very challenging to go in cold on a gig, especially when the main body of material is original music. So you know, you got to keep your ears open and pay attention. You didn't hear that song last week on the radio, you know. Mm-hmm. I remember that was in 2010, in May in 2010. I went to play a gig with those guys, and that's when I realized this guy Jimmy Berger, I'd lock in with this guy.
I'll say.
He's a solid bass player, and you know, whatever's going on here, we are just in the same place. And I remember walking away with that, you know, thinking that it wasn't my gig, it was Giusti's gig, but I had a great time doing that. And I had been doing other fill-ins with Mike Tanaka and a bunch of other folks in town. So then the next thing that happened, major thing that happened with Mark, he called me up one day and he said, would you be interested in doing some recording? I'm doing a CD at Emerson Torrey's studio. And of course I said yes. He goes, okay, I'm going to send you some MP3 sketches of the songs and familiarize yourself with them, and we'll set up a date. So he did. I was really excited about it. Wanted to make sure I, you know, got it right. So I went down and did the woodshed. I went down in the basement and got on the drums and put the headphones on and listened to the tunes. They just had a little, you know, drum machine track on them. So, you know, I assumed nothing was committed. I came up with some ideas for some parts, you know, do this in the bridge, do this at the intro, whatever. And the date came, and we started running the tracks, and I said, well, I've been working on them. I got some ideas, and I played what I had, and Emerson was producing, and Mark was there, and I played what I had, and they said, well, we kind of had another idea. You know, of course, I'm like, oh, okay, well, you know, what do you got? So they kind of communicated what they had in mind, and we worked it out. Kind of came up with whatever to try to interpret where they were directing me, and we spent the evening there. We got 2 tracks down, and I came home and I told my then wife that I don't think they're going to use my stuff. Well, what happened? I said, well, you know, I rehearsed it. They didn't really like what I had. You know, we came up with some other ideas. You know, I tried to, you know, be professional and let them know, you know, and give them what they wanted. I'm not sure if they liked it. Well, the next day I get a call from Mark. Oh, we love what you did. Can I send you 3 more songs? So, which he did. And so that was the first recording I did with Mark was Red, and I play on 5 tracks on Red. And so, you know, fast forward to Schemers made a decision that it was time to change drummers, and I was the guy. So I became the Schemers drummer and the Men of Great Courage drummer simultaneously at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of same personnel in both.
Yes, yeah. The only real difference, the only personnel difference is Banjo Bob is the guitarist and banjo player with the Men of Great Courage, and Emerson Torrey is in that spot with the Schemers. That's the only personality difference. The musical difference is, I think, pretty vast. The Schemers is definitely a more edgy band, a little more of a punk rock band. Some of the material is the same, but the approach is different. Whereas the Cutler band is a little more rootsy. The Men of Great Courage is a little more of a rootsy band. But pretty close at times.
Sometimes, like that, a couple of times I heard y'all do "Won't Get a Fooled Again" at the end of the show.
Yeah. So you never quite know what we're gonna put. You know, you never quite know what's going to happen. That's what makes it interesting and fun. Yeah. Mark will sometimes just start a song, and I'm playing something I never played before, and that's just fine with me.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And what other projects have you been involved with recording or performing that you'd like to share?
There's a lot. Thankfully, I appreciate that there has been.
Pick the one or two that really stand out.
I played GB music for a while. I did that. It was a great experience for me. I played weddings, the chicken dance, Hully Gully, all that stuff. Stevie Wonder songs, Duke Ellington songs. Stuff like that, I never probably wouldn't have gotten a chance to play. Put a tuxedo on, eat some, chicken and pasta, and I have an amazing memory of this great singer that we had for a while. This guy Drew Sullivan out of Boston.
And who was this with?
This was a band called Ultra. Perfect name for a wedding band. Larry Garabedian was a guitar player from Pawtucket. This was his band. He hired the guys. And he booked the dates, and he just call you up, you just show up, no rehearsals or anything like that. It was straight up general business stuff. And mostly weddings or, retirement parties, things like that. But one of my fondest moments is this great guy, Drew Sullivan, great singer, kind of a Sinatra style singer, singing My Way at some wedding at a VFW with his arm around Uncle, Luigi, singing with him, and I just had such a smile on my face, like this is a blast. Those gigs are not really usually that much fun. After a while, the music gets kind of tired, and it's not creatively challenging. But it was good for me to learn how to play swing. It was good to me to learn how to play bossa novas and different kind of Latin rhythms, and it was a good experience all in all.
Is that before the Rhythm Ensemble?
Let's see. That would be, that's before the Joe Perillo Ensemble, yeah.
Before the Joe Perillo Ensemble.
Yeah. And then I played for a while in a band called Soul Power, which was actually two bands. It was Soul Power and Mr. Dynamite was the other band. Soul Power was an 11-piece band with 5 horns. Played, covered songs from the Tower of Power library, from, big horn band stuff. Earth, Wind, and Fire stuff, real dance band. I played percussion in that band with the great local drummer, George Coria. That was a lot of fun. The other version of that band was a James Brown cover band, and that we played exclusively James Brown music and backed up this guy, David Cherry, who was a pretty good James Brown copy. That was a great experience to play with a big horn band like that. I was honored to be invited to be part of the Hometown Rockers Wild Turkey reunion. Again, we'd been friends forever throughout the years. Back in the 70s, we did a lot of shows together. We shared a lot of Lupo stage together. We'd finish a gig, go see them. Before you know it, we'd be on stage playing with them, vice versa. Their bass player, Pat Davis, passed away many years ago. When they came to do this reunion, they needed a bass player. They hired Marty Ballou. The singing side of what they were doing, they felt like it needed to be augmented, so they got a little background group to help with the background vocals and whatnot. So they were growing the band. They said, you know what, let's bring Rick Couto in. He used to play percussing with us all the time. Let's just add him on with his percussion setup, and that was just fantastic. We did a couple of different. We did it a couple of years in a row at the Met, and
I think I remember
so it was
one.
sold out. 4 nights sold out. Just fantastic.
That was Bowtie on the drums.
David Bowtie.
Yeah, his son Nick always comes to, or used to come to my open mic when
Oh
he
yeah,
was
Nick's
younger.
a good kid. I know Nick very well. I did a great project. It didn't really result in a lot, but the same group of people included Tom Keegan, who was the lead singer for the second version of that band. It was the Wild Turkey band that became the Hometown Rockers, and when it did, they brought in Tom Keegan, who was a songwriter and singer. Now fast forward a number of years, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, Tom wanted to record and work on some of his material, so we put a little band together with Emerson Torrey from the Schemers, myself on drums, Tom Keegan, Richard Ribb, and Eric North, who was also in both of those bands, the Rockers.
Yep.
And yeah, we did a little recording. We did some interesting stuff. It wasn't fruitful in terms of doing gigs, but it was a fantastic experience. So yeah, it definitely makes my list of good things to do.
Oh, yeah.
You know, locally, I've played with a lot of local bands. I get called to sit in a lot. The Professors, the Bus Kings, the Jelly Roll Soul. One of my most memorable little one-shot only gigs was with Duke Robillard. You know, here's a guy that I'm honored to even say that I know, that I have a friendly relationship with him is an honor. We were working on in fact, someone else that needs to be mentioned with any interview with any Rhode Island musician is Paul Murphy. He was an incredible musician in our town. He left us way too early. He spent many times on stage with Riz back in the 70s. He was a bright light in our musical community. He passed away on the road with Duke, as a matter of fact, in Brazil is when he passed away. Since he's passed away, many years we do a benefit. It benefits the music school in Rhode Island that teaches young people to play. My son has gone to the music school for several years. One of the ensembles is identified as the Paul Murphy Touring Ensemble. And the last year my son was involved in the school, he was in the Paul Murphy Touring Ensemble. One of these events that we were doing to raise money for this, in Paul's name, we were at the Hi-Hat in Providence, and we put together a group around Dennis McCarthy, which was we were trying to do something similar to the band that Paul Murphy played with him in, called the Groove Masters. They had a percussionist in that band. John Lamoille was the percussionist in that band. He wasn't available, so they asked me to do it. We're doing our set. Dennis flew up from Florida. We had no rehearsal. He's just calling the tunes cold. We're doing our set. It was Dave Cannery on guitar, another fellow on guitar, Kenny Hadley on drums, and Marty Ballou on bass, me on percussion. And after 1 or 2 songs, Dennis calls Duke up to join. So Duke comes up, and now he joins Dave Cannery. And my heart starts beating because I know Dave is a huge fan of Duke. I don't think Dave had ever played with Duke. So I was smiling. I was like, wow, this is great. I get to watch this. And the set came off great. Duke stayed on the stage for the whole rest of the set. Those guys traded solos. It was fantastic. So fast forward a couple of weeks, I go to see Roomful of Brews at a reunion thing at Lupo's, and they were doing the whole history of Roomful. So Duke was there to play his part in that show. And he was there with his regular drummer. They tracked me down. And Duke had a project called Tiki Lounge that he did with a singer, and his regular drummer worked on it with him in the studio, and it was a lot of percussion, a lot of congas and bongos, and it was a little different for Duke. And so his drummer was going out of town during the time when Duke was planning to do the CD release party. So they invited me to play. Because of my experience that I had on stage that day with Duke, he said he was surprised. He didn't really think a percussionist could fit in with the blues, but that the way I played, that impressed him. And this stuff wasn't necessarily blues, but we were probably going to end up doing some swing tunes and stuff like that. So I created sort of a hybrid kit, and knowing that Duke loves the old-time music, I used my father's kit, and I put the percussion on one side and the kit on the, kind of half and half, and I kind of spun back and forth and played the swing stuff on my father's kit and the Latin stuff on the percussion thing. It was a one-shot deal. I knew, I was going to be in a band or anything with Duke, but it was certainly one of the highlights of my life to do a weekend at Chan's with Duke Robillard.
Cool. So it was a series of shows at Chan's.
It was 2 nights.
2 nights.
Yeah, a week.
At some point, you alluded to Max. Now, when we first met Rick, I was very impressed with Max.
Yeah.
How did and what is he doing now in terms of music, and how did he get there?
Well, how he get there? I mean, he got there because he lives in his house. I would think that would be pretty much, put the whole thing in a nutshell. I mean, there's drums around. He was born with, music playing when he was in his mom's belly in our house. There's a video somewhere in our collection of me dancing with him this big in my arms with James Brown music in the background. So I always had little hand drums and stuff all around the house. So, kind of I thought was pretty special. Put a drum in front of him when he was, 1.5, 2, whatever. And most kids, if you do that, they'd take their 2 hands and they bang on the drum. Max went right, left, right, left, right, left. And my eyes opened wide. I was like, wow. I said to his mother, see what's going on here? And, she didn't really perceive. I said what I just said to you. And I said, he's going right and right, left. And I thought that was pretty spectacular, So he's been around drums all the time. Whenever we had the opportunity, as little as he could be, he'd come and see me play. I'd have rehearsals in the house. He'd be around for that. And, finally he was old enough and he wanted to, get a little set of drums. We got him a set of drums. He started playing at the school. He went to the Barrington Christian Academy. They had a band. He was the drummer. They had shows and, they played different, Christian type music. And that's, he just naturally just moved right into it.
Very cool.
He took lessons from Vinnie Pagano for a few years and kind of finished that up. He sort of felt like that wasn't his path, that he really just wanted to play, didn't really want to study music in that way. But Max is taking the Couto drumming legacy to like a whole new level. He's an amazing technician. He's an amazing drummer. He plays mostly like heavy metal, alternate type of metal, a lot of odd time signatures. But he also can go to a jam session and, play a shuffle, and play a 1-4-5 blues with, anybody, and has a feel for it. He's covered my gigs with Mark Cutler on several occasions.
I remember you two switching out. Not that he covered for you. Just kind of.
When we did the CD release party for Sweet Pain. With Sweet Pain, I had the opportunity to go in and do some overdubs with tambourine and shakers, and in one song in particular, we did a lot of that. With Sweet Pain, we had a CD release party. We invited Max to play percussion. We invited some other musicians to come in too, because you overdub stuff on the record. We had this concept. We were trying to reproduce the record pretty much. And so, on the songs that Mark played acoustic guitar, he played acoustic guitar. On the song where there was 2 lead guitarists, we got Emerson Torrey to join us.
All right, we were going to resume with the recording projects.
Great. Well, recording projects. Of course, the ones I've done recently with Mark are probably worth mentioning. Those are probably I'm most proud of. Sweet Pain being one. I worked on Dreamland a little bit with him and Red, I mentioned earlier. I've recorded with lots of demo stuff at Celebration Sounds. I've worked with Dan Moretti years ago on a couple of things. Joe Perillo, we did 2 CDs with that band. I've done a lot of little demo work, just various artists. I did a thing Mark produced recently for this woman, Victoria. I can't remember her last name, sorry. Anyway, I get a chance to get in the studio, and it's another challenge. The studio is a whole another animal.
Sure is.
And it's always fun to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a kind of way of segueing out, do you want to tell us about your dad's drums, which you're sitting right next to?
Yeah, well, these are my dad's drums from the 40s. This is a 28-inch Ludwig and Ludwig bass drum and full kit. I have all 4 pieces. I still have a couple of his cymbals and some of his other gear, and it's playable. We don't really play it. We keep it here in the living room, just on display. And it's a tremendous artifact. And actually, I have a situation where I'm going to be going up to Zildjian in a couple of weeks, and they were very curious about the 3 generations of
generations of drummers.
Zildjian drummers,
wow,
as they call it.
Very cool. Well,
we all use Zildjian.
Well, thank you very much, Rick. This is great. Very informative.
Thanks for being here.